There it is. Okay. We are in the time of the judges. Okay. And this is a time, the easiest way to put it is they were moving away from God. So imagine you've got Passover, wilderness, they kind of do a little rebelling, little grumbling. And then we move into this, we want something more, we want the judge, and that is the symbol of, we're not really content with just you, God, we need somebody else, and they are, let me just tell you how it says in the scripture. This is the very, very last line of the book of Judges.
Yeah.
And it says this. It says, in those days, there was no king, and all the people did what was right in their own eyes.
Ooh, it's like
That's a summary of where we are.
chaotic
that is-
mess.
Right before, that is the last line. And then we have the book of Ruth, and then you have the book of First Samuel. So this is literally everybody is doing right what's in their own eyes. How about, that's just like the synopsis right there. Okay, so there's 3 layers of thinking. This is something that Stacy talked about the first week, and if you missed it, I thought this was so incredibly excellent. I wanted to make sure as we are reading this part, this is really important for the rest of the book, as we're reading it, to realize that there's 3 layers of thinking. The first layer is when the events actually happened to the people that were there. Okay, that's one layer of thinking, because then they communicated it to generations later, because we know that it was written 300 years around after the events. So think about how history looks different now. We're going to be studying Sojourner Truth this Sunday. And one of the fascinating things that's come out about her is that the second wave of, I don't want to get too into it. My point is, she's been recreated by the African-American community and the feminist community to be something even more than what she really was. And that's what history can do. So anyway, so you've got what had happened, then it told people, and then what happened after that, and then you've got who wrote it. So you've got 3 layers of thinking. Another key for the book, the backdrop of what's going on, especially in what we read today, is this is a time of major transition. From tribal confederacy, so imagine 12 tribes of Jacob, right? They're all spread out, and they all have their own little rules and systems, and they're trying to follow the law. And then all of a sudden, they're gonna come underneath the king. This is a complete, Stacey said, this is like the United States when we were moving through the Revolutionary War or Civil War. Huge change in politics, and how you did life, and how you traded, and who you were neighbor with, what your land was. I mean, who owned the land? Can't compare it. None of us have experienced anything like this in our lifetime. So I just wanted to go through that review. So before our scripture, what has just happened, Samuel has just been anointed by Eli. He has just been anointed. And then for the chapters that we're going to do today, 4, 5, and 6, neither of them are mentioned. No, sorry, Samuel is not mentioned for 3 chapters. And the bottom line for what we're going to study today is Philistine pressure. And that is the move from confederacy to a monarchy. So Israel has to pay attention to what is the giant of a people. And if you look at the outline of the book, I found this graphic and I thought it was super helpful. So this is a presentation of who Samuel is. And at the beginning, when he's like 1 to 12 years old, which is up to what we've read before today, you've got Samuel's birth and call. So this is just him as a young boy. And then this Ark of the Lord section, which is 20 years. When he's a teenager, all the way till he's 32, we don't see Samuel in scripture. He's not there.
Wow.
No mention.
Huh.
He's not mentioned in this text.
Either.
Right. And then when it comes back, I remember reading it years ago and thinking, like, wait, did I miss something, and having to go back? And yesterday I had to go back too, because I was like, wait, did I miss something? And you don't. It's just like there's this, they call them the silent years. And this is his public ministry over here. Okay, it's just very fascinating stuff. And so we are going to read a little bit of chapter 4 to start, because I want to get us into the text. And so if someone could read I think it's the first, so Samuel is right after Ruth, right after Judges. If someone could read, we're starting in chapter 4. My book, I want to show y'all. My book has chapter 4, verse 1 in a separate section.
In separate reading.
Everybody's?
Yeah.
Okay, that is not how all Bibles have it, so I was curious whose doesn't.
I don't know what I've got.
But does yours, what is your, where does your 4:1? And the word of Samuel came to all Israel?
Yeah,
Where's that?
we're right, the beginning of chapter 4. Yeah.
Here's chapter 4. Okay, so it can be either. Remember that in the original Hebrew, there were not numbers, there were not chapters. So it was completely based on, but what I want to say is that, remember, we're in this time of moving away from God. And then Samuel, it's so ironic to me, the authors. And then the word of God came to Samuel, but we don't hear from Samuel for 3 chapters. There's something there. I just want to say, he's supposedly, we're going to see in 3 chapters, he's going to be the one that helps bring them back and anoint the king and help them come back to God. But they still have to go through this battles that we're going to experience for the next 3 chapters. So someone read 1 through 4 to get us started.
I will. And Samuel's word went out to all Israel. In those days, the Philistines gathered for war against Israel. So Israel went out to engage the Philistines in war. Israel at Ebenezer, while the Philistines camped at Aphek. The Philistines readied themselves to fight Israel. When the battle was joined, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the battlefield. When the troops returned to the camp, Israel's elders said, "Why did the Lord defeat us today before the Philistines?"
Stop there. Okay, sorry. So we have to stop there because there's just too much that's just going on. It is they say, why has did you read verse 4?
No.
Oh, my bad. Okay, read through verse 4. Start with, why has the Lord put us to rout today?
Why did the Lord defeat us before the Philistines? Let's bring the chest containing the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that it can go with us and save us from our enemy's power. So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the chest containing the covenant of the Lord of heavenly forces, who sits enthroned on the winged heavenly creatures. Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the chest containing God's covenant.
Okay. So they noticed that you might have been like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that, because in verse 2, the Israelites are defeated by the Philistines. And you're like, wait, what do you mean? Okay, this is really important for us to be aware of who the Philistines were. And I'm gonna get to that. I think I get to that in a minute, because I want to show you. Well, I'll show you in a second. There's just so many things I want to show you, so it's really hard for me to have to stay focused on this. Okay, so God is a good luck charm. Why has the Lord put us to test today? And what do they say? Oh, let's bring the Ark of the Covenant. Here says the chest of the covenant forward, right? So this is important to talk about ancient Israelite theology. This is something I often forget because we are so Christocentric. It is hard for us to imagine God without Christ in the Spirit and without the cross. There is no concept of any of that. So this is ancient Israelite theology, and I'm absolutely admitting that I am summing this up. It's not simplistic. God controls and wills all things, both good and evil. So you know how we are so intentional to say in the pulpit, in classes, when you're talking to people, God is not a chess player. God is not doing this. That is not what ancient Israel thought. They 100% thought that God would smite you, that God would bless you, that everything was at the hands of God. There was this concept that there was no concept yet of this. That people are broken, that people sin, that people mess up, and we are in a broken world that is in need of a savior. That's not, I just want to make sure, I just think that that's important to point out. There wasn't this concept of, oh, why do you act so bad? Have you ever watched I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but any of those ancient shows that are about ancient people, and you're like, how can they just kill people? They didn't have this concept of, oh, I shouldn't, or I don't, life wasn't, you went to war, you lived in war. It's just, we live in a very antiseptic society compared to the ancient world. Okay, very safe, non-exposed, and yet we might think it's maybe dangerous for other reasons, but we are talking, there wasn't this concept of, I mean, it was eye for eye. This is real life, literally for thousands and thousands of years. So in the Israelite theology, there were many tribes. What set them apart is they worshiped this one God, Yahweh. Other people it wasn't just that they were monotheistic, because other people worshiped Baal. They would have said that was their God. Other people worshiped other named gods. So it wasn't necessarily that they were solely unique in being monotheistic, but they all only worshiped this one God, Yahweh, who told them on the mountain, you shall worship me alone and serve me only. So that's the heart of their theology. Worship and life are not as much about living as they are tied to this history, tied to the land. So rooted in the land. And so you're going to see this, that place really matters. Where we worship really matters. What we do when we worship, what we say, what we wear, what we eat, who touches what, who doesn't touch. Like, it's all about that. It's very, what's this word? Legalistic. And this, geolocated.
Oh, yeah.
Like we say, oh, the churches cannot be held by walls. Like there was no concept of that. Like they living on the land was their living into being the people that they felt called to be. God is to be worshiped at holy sites. You didn't just worship God in your tent. God was your God, but worship, because worship was the primary act of worship in the ancient Israel world. You know this. What was the act? Sacrifice. You weren't going to sacrifice things in your own home.
Right.
You had to do it at an altar. So in the ancient world, they were these holy sites. You probably remember hearing of them in the Old Testament: Shechem, Shiloh, Gilgal. Now, mind you, the other peoples like the Philistines, they had their holy sites too, where they worshiped Baal. And that's what we're going to read about. That's where they kind of step into there. So that's where you worshiped. You didn't worship. God was not something that you did as a daily relationship. This is just, okay. So maybe this is all like repetition for y'all, but I just needed to be reminded. The central figure at each of these shrine cities is the judge up to this point. And so Samuel is going to be our first prophet, our last judge, our first prophet. So like Deborah the judge, she would have been set up at one of those cities as the person who then oversaw the worship along with the priests. I think is important for us as we see what's going to happen. The most important feast or worship in this time was the Feast of the Tabernacles, and that's when they would reaffirm their allegiance to Yahweh. So you figure, fast forward 1,000 years, and Jews would go to Jerusalem for the Feast of the Tabernacles. There's no Jerusalem yet. There's no temple yet. David hasn't been born. There's no temple. There's none of that. They're traveling in tents. This is, literally traveling in tents and setting up a place. And then they finally have set up these 3 cities, Shiloh, Shechem, and Gilgal. And so Feast of Tabernacles is when all the different peoples would then go to one of those sites to have their Easter. That's what I'm going to call it. That's not what it was. Okay, this is now read 5 to 11,
I can do it.
okay?
When the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. When the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, "What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "Gods have come into the camp." They also said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. Take courage and be men, O Philistines, in order not to become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought. Israel was defeated
Second time.
and they fled, everyone to his home. There was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died.
Wow.
Okay, so we've got now a major slaughter. This is like 10 times what happened before. And two major leaders have now died. So this is a picture this is not an exact, this is what it would have been like. This is the difference.
This is not.
So Israelites are hill country people. They're urban, I mean, they're rural, they literally live in hills.
Yeah.
They don't have, okay, so then let me show you this. This will help frame it out. So what we know about the Philistines is that in this time, they are people that they call the sea people because they came by boat from the sea. That doesn't mean that they thought they were mermaids or mermen. But they controlled all of this, okay? Canaan, this is Canaan. They control this. And which means they could control what was able to get put into Israel. You'll see later in the book of Samuel, they don't let Israel have any of the iron. And so Israel doesn't ever get good weapons. This is like, you see it played out in the book of Samuel. I'm just letting you know now. They are a giant of a people, and not because of their size necessarily, but because of their technology. Because they had helmets to protect them here. I mean, you know, all the things that we've seen about Goliath,
Yeah.
except that he was a giant. So David didn't even, I mean, he was a shepherd. That is what our Israelites did. They weren't fighters. They were like farmers.
Soldiers.
Yeah, they were not soldiers. They're much more advanced. They are advanced also because when you live on the coast of a busy area like this, you're exposed to more people. And the more exposure that you have, the more you discover about people and world and life. I mean, they just have a much, much bigger worldview than the Israelites did. So these are things that would have given them strength because they were this maritime people. And whereas Israel is so isolated in the hills. And so what you need to know is that for 50 years until David, they are dominating this area. That they're completely in control of this area. And so here you have, look, I mean this area. So there you have Shiloh, where that's where one of the temples would have been set up. Here's Gilgal is the other one. Here's Bethel. So that would have been those would have been Israelite locations. Notice Jerusalem, Bethlehem, it's not part of it. This is in the hill country, but it's safe. They can hide. And then what we're gonna see, now, I can't remember if you had any locations there. So, Aphek,
Not yet.
that was the first battle, right here. That first battle where they killed 4,000 people. So look, this is where they came over into Philistine territory, and that's where that battle was. Well, of course they lost. They came into their territory, and these people have stronger weapons. And then the next time, where's the next battle? So the people sent to Shiloh, they brought from there the ark, the ark, they came, the Philistines were afraid. So
don't
the
talk
Philistines
about
fought, it just, it doesn't say where, does it?
Not until chapter 5,
Okay,
I don't think.
what I think is a couple things that are interesting about this text here is this. Look at verse 6. What does this great, oh no, not that. Look at verse 7. The gods have come into the camp. Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us. There is this awareness of the people of Philistine that they're, I went too far. We're gonna today. Hold on. Okay. Awareness of the power with no acknowledgement of fear. That's what the Israelites did. Let us bring the Ark of the Covenant so that he may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies. Not so that it is powerful. It can save us from their power. Do you see the difference there? So they aware of the power, but they have no acknowledgement of the fear of God. In contrast, you have the Philistines who have this awareness of the holiness and fear of the power. They say, gods have come into camp who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods. Power of gods, power of our enemies. Do you, I mean, it's just, and this is a hugely convicting thing for me. Because I sometimes get in these ruts where I talk more about what Satan is doing or what the enemy of God is capable of, as opposed to what God is capable of over that. And I think that is a strain of Christianity that I can sometimes fall into. And realizing this, I think I said this in one of our last Bible studies, is it actually, I feel like it's giving Satan power, giving Satan voice. Like, why would I talk about Satan like that? I should be talking about what God is doing, you know? And so that is something I'm like, I'm not gonna give voice, I'm not gonna say, oh, well, that's because of the devil. I'm gonna be like, God can overcome that. You see the flip of that?
Yes.
And I think what they're doing is they're like, fear, total fear. It's this fear response to what they should be doing. I think I have one more. Okay, so I guess that was the next question is, what about us? And I want to open it up to the floor. I don't want to talk the whole time. When have you experienced one of these, either awareness of the power with no acknowledgement of fear, or you're really aware of the holiness and fear of the power? Because we don't like to talk about the awesome godness, meaning awe as in scary. You know, it can put the fear of God. We don't want to do that. Anything come to mind for y'all? Okay, so why do the Philistines why do they even want the ark? So what they would have known and heard about is that the ark had given ancestors victory in war. This is why the Israelites would have wanted it. Sorry. Why was the ark a good luck charm? So I want you to turn to Joshua 6:6-7, because I have forgotten these stories, like what it had done, and they would have heard these stories and been like, we need to go get it. That will help us defeat. So Joshua 6, this is what's happening. Joshua they're outside of Jericho, and this is what God says. God says in chapter 6, take up the ark of the covenant and have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord. To the people he said, go forward and march around the city. Have the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord. As Joshua had commanded the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. And the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. The rear guard came after the ark. Do you see the detail of this? And that is what they carried when they marched around Jericho and the walls fell. The walls came tumbling down. We sometimes are like, oh, it was they're shouting.
I know.
Oh, it was the fact that they had this holy good luck charm, if you will. And then the next one is the ark was an act of worship specifically in war. It was a means in the midst of war that you could come before the ark and you could seek counsel. And this is a fabulous story. Turn to Judges 20. Remember, that's right before 1 Samuel, right at Ruth, right before Ruth. So the Israelites advanced, this is when they're fighting against the Benjaminites. The Israelites advanced against the Benjaminites the second day. Benjamin moved out against them from Gibeah the second day and struck down 18,000 of the Israelites, all of them armed men. Then, so everybody's sad. 18,000 people just died. Then all the Israelites, the whole army, went back to Bethel, which is one of their shrine cities, and wept, sitting there before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening. Then they offered burnt offerings and sacrifices. What are they doing? Worshiping at Shiloh. And the Israelites inquired, at Bethel. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. They prayed. Why? For the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. So there was this, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, ministered before it in that day, saying, they're praying to God in front, they inquired of the Lord in front of the ark. Shall we go out once more to battle against our kinfolk, the Benjaminites, or shall we desist? And the Lord answered. The Lord spoke because, and the author is sure to tell us, because the ark of the covenant of the Lord was there. So there was this, it was, so now flip back to 1 Samuel. Now do you see why they wanted the ark of the Lord to come? They had just gotten defeated by 4,000.
Yep.
Okay, so then this begs the question, why did they not win this time? Why didn't they win? Why didn't God let them win?
Doesn't it go back to what you shared at the very beginning, when the people were thinking that they were all doing what was right in their own minds, and they worshiped themselves. They weren't really worshiping God. And so they didn't have that relationship with him anymore. It was gone.
Okay.
It's kind of
Yes, but do we think that if my adult sons decide to leave the church for 10 years, and then in the 6th year, they need God, does that mean that God's like, sorry, you've been gone 6 years?
no.
Okay, but
Find
see,
out.
why is that? Why do we have that frame of reference? Because we understand grace. There's no concept of grace. I say this because it doesn't change who God is.
Right.
It doesn't change who God is, but that is what they really thought. The ark was a good luck charm. So what's the lesson for us? It's not a good luck charm. More importantly, you're not guaranteed. You can do all the things you want, and you can still have awful things happen to you in life, because that's just not part of the promises of God.
Absolutely.
So if I was to rewrite this, if my mind could have been in their mind, it would have been, this is not God's will. We went through this for some reason. It wasn't that God punished us or that God let us be killed by 40,000 people so that we could learn a lesson. It was, oh my gosh, because war happened, we're broken.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with it? How is God going to bring glory out of this? Do you see? So God didn't change. It's the same God. It's just that the people that wrote it, they didn't even have concepts that we can think. There's still truth in it. That's what I love about truth is the truth is we need to make sure that we're not treating God like a vending machine.
Right.
So if you put enough in, and I have a major tendency to legalize that. And like, if I do all the right things, and then I should be safe. My kids should be safe. And like when Riley got injured, I was talking to my girlfriend Candace, and I was like, but I pray for his safety every day. And she was like, well, safety doesn't necessarily mean you don't tear your ACL.
Yeah.
Like that's your version of safe. And I was like, shoot, why are you right?
I always go back to that it actually really could be a promise of God that we will, like Jesus said, we will, in the world, you will have trouble. So that is a promise. And so when trouble does come, it goes back to he that is in me is greater than he that is in this world. And I loved what you said when you said, instead of focusing so much on what Satan is doing, acknowledge that power because he does have power, but acknowledge the power greater in us and what God can do versus what Satan is doing. God's already ahead of it.
Yes.
We don't have to.
God has this picture that and it doesn't comfort you when you're in the midst of strife. It doesn't.
No,
But when you're on the other side of it, you're like, oh yeah,
you see it.
Mhm. I do want to just show you all this hysterical, scene here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Why did it not? There we go. This is the Ark. The 1981 movie, The Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's Indian. I just have to show this one part because it's so fascinating to me. So they open it up, there's just sand. And then watch what happens.
Don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Mary. Don't look at it no matter what happens.
Beautiful.
Don't look right! Keep your eyes shut!
They all die. That came from the Bible.
That's one way to get rid of it.
That came.
I've seen that since 1980.
Oh, no,
Gosh, my gosh.
That is literally, oh, thank you for turning this on. Why did my? What was I using?
Don't rub it in, okay?
Almost.
I was just gonna get blocked.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, y'all. It's in one of these. There, no. How do I get out of here? No? I might have
Can you
to
just close your, can you?
close YouTube.
Close,
Can you just close
can you
YouTube?
close your head? Can you do that?
I don't know how to close it. Let's do this. Hold tight, hold tight. We still have a lot more. We've only finished one chapter.
There you go. You're back.
We can't see it. Is it here? Let me stop sharing for a sec. Oh, no,
No,
there it is, got it.
there it is. There you go.
One day, I'm gonna just be able to do this and it's gonna be really cool. It's gonna look really good. Now it's being slow. Hold tight.
You got a room full of IT.
Can you-
You're good.
Can you slide down your,
I'll
yeah,
just do
can you do that?
Okay. So. We compared now we are going to look at comparing, I want to just review. The ark has been captured. Now we're moving into Eli dying and then what happens with the ark. So we don't have time. I knew this would happen. So just real quick. Well, it's actually kind of a very sad story. But one of the soldiers runs back to tell Eli that his sons have died, and in grief, he falls backward and he breaks his neck. And I quote, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken and died, for he was an old man and heavy.
And heavy.
He was a little overweight.
I read this this morning, I was like, okay, yes, there you go.
It was a little heavy, and so his weight crushed his neck. It's very sad. But then the daughter-in-law, because remember, Phineas and Hophni have died, but their wives are still alive. So they died, and then she, in her grief, goes into labor. And she has the child Ichabod, not Ichabod Crane. But Ichabod, and she names him that because Ichabod means the glory has departed. Not because her husband died. Not because her father-in-law died. Because the ark of the Lord of God has been captured. That was how much that had a place in their religious system, was that the ark of God has now been captured. Now, what you need to know is that in ancient Israelite times, it was common when you raided another people to take their objects of worship. And it was believed that the victor would actually get the power then from that God. Like it kind of moved into your hands. And so the Philistines are thinking, we heard that roar when the ark came. We know that it has this power. We're going to take it. We're going to take it with us. Okay. So that's where we're at now. Let's see what happens in chapter 5. Someone read 1 through 12.
After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it before Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place. But the following morning, when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. That is why to this day, neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold.
So that's the first place. that it goes to. And I do have a cool, do I have a map? Yeah, I want to show you just this movement of the, there you go. So it actually, this is a really cool map I found. So it went from Shiloh, it started here in Aphek, remember, that's where that first battle was.
Okay.
And it was in Shiloh, they asked for it to come. Okay, so that's movement there. Then it goes to Ashdod, this is where we are. That's where the Dagon guy is that falls over in the temple. That's where we are, we're only right here. Look how much more it has to travel. Okay, next bit. The hand of the Lord was heavy upon the people of Ashdod. So not only has the idol fallen, and he terrified and struck them with tumors,
Yeah.
both in Ashdod and in its territory. And when the inhabitants of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is heavy on us and our God Dagon. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? The inhabitants of Gath replied, let the ark of God move on to us. Because they're thinking, that might just have been something with them, like maybe that's your God.
Oh, wow.
It's so fascinating. So they moved the ark of the God of Israel to Gath, but after they had brought it to Gath, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic. He struck the inhabitants of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of the God of Israel to Ekron. When the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, why have they brought around? At this point, they're like, okay, no, we don't. The ark of God to kill us and our people. They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of God of Israel. Let it return to its own place that it may not kill us. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. Those who did not die were stricken with tumors, and the city and the cry of the city went up to heaven. So we're now at Ekron. Okay, where it says 6 right there. So that's just chapter 5 is just the ark moving. So then, this is interesting. This is really fascinating story to me. So I'm gonna just summarize it. So the ark of the Lord is in the country, is in the Philistine area for 7 months. Because I mean, even little distances like this, it would have traveled a lot, which I'm really surprised at, is that we don't have a story about them doing something wrong with the ark. Because we do later in Samuel, where someone accidentally touched it or da. And so I just think it's fascinating that that's not mentioned here. So,
It's just in the movie.
yeah. Oh, no, there is a couple, I know, stories coming. So then look at verse 2. 6:2. The Philistines called for the priests and the diviners. See, they had priests. It's not like they didn't have non-religious diviners, people, the wise ones. And they asked them, what should we do with this ark? Because we need it returned, but now we're kind of scared because it's got power. We don't know what to do with it. And then this is what the diviners say. Verse 3, if you send away the ark of God, don't send it empty. Don't send it away empty. But by all means, return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed and will be ransomed. Will not his hand then turn from you? They realize there's such an awareness that they are plagued. They have to do something. You can't just return it empty. What do you think about that? That concept of an apology, an empty apology. Asking for forgiveness without repentance. This idea of just, well, we returned it. I did it. I did what I was supposed to do. It's just, there's not the gravitas. It doesn't seem like the heart.
But their mindset was sacrifice, right? So they were inclined to be willing to do something.
Do something. But we're not. I don't feel like that's part of modern humanity is what's the least I can do to get the most reward, to get the most out of this. What's the least I can do? Especially teenagers. And they mumble.
Just say you're sorry and you're clean and clear.
That's what they think.
Right. Transactional.
Mhm. Okay, so they come up with this idea of making so random to me. And they said, make 5 gold tumors and 5 gold mice.
Mine says rats.
Mine says
Sounds
rats.
grosser.
5 gold rats, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines, for the same plague was upon all of you and upon your lords. And take those tumors and those rats and put them into the ark. And then he says, verse 6, why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? After he had made fools of them, did they not let the people go and they departed? I mean, they're literally quoting stuff from Israelite history.
So cool.
So that shows you the 3 layers, like how they're interpreting it and how they're just fascinating to me. Now then, get ready a new cart. And I would love to know the strategy for this. Get ready a new cart and 2 milch cows that have never borne a yoke. And yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. Take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart and put it in a box in its side, the figures of gold which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go its way, and watch. If it goes up on the way to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, if it goes its way to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his hand that struck us, it happened to us by chance. They're totally putting God to the test. Now, what would we say? What would we say is a more likely, well, look what happens, and then I want you to tell me what you think. The men did so. They took 2 milch cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. They put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box of the gold mice. The cows went straight in the direction of Beth Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border. So they went towards their, what? They went towards their home.
Oh.
Well, why did they go towards their home? Because they knew it?
The
To me,
calves were there?
The calves were there, maybe?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, this is just common sense to me,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Like I don't understand why. That's a big, maybe I'm misreading something, but to me, I don't. Now in that moment, the people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest. They looked up and they saw the ark. Now Beth Shemesh is an Israelite area. Okay, so this is not Philistine, I said Palestine. This is not Philistine land. And it says the cart came into the field of Joshua and stopped there. And a large stone, they split it up. And then they offered burnt sacrifices right in that moment. And the 5 lords of the Philistines are up on the hill watching this happen. And then when that happens, they leave and they go back to Ekron. So it's back in the hands. It's back in the hands. It's returned to the Israelites. But then look what happens. I want to make sure you saw this. In verse 15, 6:15. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box of the side in which were the gold objects. Then the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and presented sacrifices.
Mhm.
So what did they do? They worshiped.
They worshiped him.
Fast forward to verse 19. The descendants of Jeconiah did not rejoice with the people of Beth Shemesh. So there were people within the city that didn't rejoice. They didn't worship the ark. When they greeted the ark of the Lord, and he killed 70 men of them, as in God. The people mourned because the Lord had made a great slaughter among the people. Then the people of Beth Shemesh said, who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? To whom shall we go that we may be rid of him? To whom shall we go that we may be rid of him? They sound just like the Philistines. And Levi, there's priests there. And these are supposed to be the people that are keeping up. See how far away they've moved? They don't even get it. All they're worried about is self-preservation. To whom shall he go that we may be rid of him? So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you. And the people of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill. They consecrated his son Eleazar to have charge of the ark of the Lord. And from that day, from the day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So 20 years, it stays here. At Kiriath Jearim. And all those 20 years, that's when Samuel's growing up. And then all of a sudden, we're gonna come back in the next chapter, and Samuel's back on the scene. In chapter 7.